Okay everybody, Dollhouse Fridge, take 2.
Hi guys, welcome back to the channel, and if you're new here, I'm Stella and I love making miniatures for my Barbie's dollhouse using mainly cardstock. In today's video, I'll show you how to make this miniature fridge for your dolls. And as always, I have a free printable template to help you make your own version. You'll find all the infos and the download link in the video, so now let's get started! Cut this part of the template 3 or 4 times and stack the layers together. As usual, I suggest using cardstock from old packagings. The final piece should be around 2mm thick. Now the cardstock I used was already white, but if yours isn't, I advise you paint it with white acrylics, and you'll see why in just a second. Now cut this part into glossy photo paper. You can also use a sheet of white plastic, or even just a piece of paper covered in clear tape. Glue it to the base we just prepared, like this. Next, cut these parts and glue them on top of the previous ones, making sure that these little holes are aligned with the ones underneath. Now cut this part into cardstock, then print this part and attach it to the cardstock base. Glue the resulting piece here. And this is what we should have at this point. Set this piece aside for a moment, then cut this part 3 or 4 times, and once again attach all the layers together. The final piece should be 2mm in thickness. Attach it to the piece we made earlier this way. Then cut this part into glossy paper and glue it here. Now cut this piece and fold it along the dashed lines. Glue the little tabs to create this tiny shelf support. Attach it to one of these slots, then make more to fill all of them. Repeat the steps for the opposite side, flipping the gloss layer horizontally like this so that it mirrors the other side. Next, cut this part into clear plastic. I use this type that is 1mm thick, and I'll link it in the description box in case you want to buy it. But you can also use the thinner clear plastic that you can find in many types of packaging. It's not going to be as sturdy, but it'll work. Cut 3 identical pieces. Then paint the front rim of each shelf with white paint and clear nail polish. Glue the shelves to the shelf holders this way. I suggest starting from the lower shelf and then move up. Now cut this part, and I cut one layer into cardstock and the other one into photo paper. Then print this part and attach it on top of the others. Glue the resulting piece here. Now cut this part, and again you'll have to cut and glue together 3 or 4 layers. We're gonna need 2 of these. Attach them to the rest of the structure. Then cover them with this part, cut into photo paper. This is what we should have at this point. Now cut these strips into photo paper and glue them over the edges of the structure like this. To make a drawer for a little fridge, cut this part of the template into lightweight cardstock. Fold it along the dashed or scored lines. Then glue the tabs to create a sort of little open box. Next, cut this part into photo paper and glue 2 layers to the bottom of the drawer. Then cut these pieces and attach them to the drawer's sides. Now cut this part into clear plastic, and this time I chose to use the thinner kind. Fold it along the dashed lines this way. Attach the final piece to the front part of the drawer. I would advise you use the double-sided tape for this, and as always you can find a short list of the supplies I'm using for this project in the description. Next, cut this part into photo paper twice and glue it to the drawer's outer sides. I also decided to add this little design to the front of my drawer, and if you're using my free printable template, I suggest drawing this with a marker using the template as a guide. Now that the inner part of the fridge is ready, we can start working on the freezer. Cut this part into cardstock 3 or 4 times and stack the layers together. Once again, the final piece should be around 2mm thick. Cover the resulting piece with this part, cut into photo paper, and top it off with these parts. And just a reminder, if you have a Cricut or a Silhouette cutting machine, you can use my digital templates, which you can find in my shop, linked in the description box. Now cut this 3 or 4 times, glue the layers together, and attach the final piece to the one we prepared earlier. Cover the inner side with this part, cut into photo paper. Then cut this into cardstock 3 times. Stack the elements together, then top the piece off with a glossy layer. Cover the edge of the finished piece with this paper strip. Repeat the same process for these parts. Glue these 3 elements to the side of the freezer, like this. Repeat the same steps for the opposite side. Now cut and paint these 2 shelves just like we did for the fridge, and glue them into the freezer. Next, cut this part into cardstock 6 to 8 times and attach the elements in 2 groups of 3 or 4 layers each. The final pieces should be 2 mm in thickness. Glue them to the bottom and top part of the freezer, then cover them with this part cut into photo paper. And for the top part, I actually found it easier to cover it with photo paper before attaching it to the rest of the structure. Now cut this part into lightweight cardstock and fold all the sides along the dashed lines. Glue the tabs to create this small box. Then cut this part once into cardstock and once into photo paper and attach both elements to the front of the box. Repeat the same step for this part. Then cut these little circles and glue them into these holes this way. Top them off with this part. Then add a small dotted design with a pen or a fine tip marker. Lastly, cover the right and bottom side of the box with these parts cut into photo paper. Glue the resulting piece to the top left corner of the freezer like this. Finally, cover the edges of the freezer with these strips cut into photo paper. It's time to connect the freezer to the fridge. Cut this part a handful of times and glue the layers together in groups of 3. You should end up with 5 identical pieces. Glue them to the top of the freezer, 1 aligned with the front, 1 to the back, and the remaining 3 in the middle. Then attach them to the bottom of the fridge. Now cut this part several times, and once again you'll have to stack all the elements in groups of 3 layers until you have 5 identical pieces. Glue them to the bottom of the freezer this way. Now cut this part, and again you'll have to cut multiple layers and stack them together. The final piece should be around 4 mm in thickness. I used a combination of cardstock and matte board for this because matte board is a little thicker and it made the job faster. Attach the resulting piece to the left side of the fridge, then repeat the steps to cover the right side and finally the top and bottom using this part of the template. Next, cut this part 2 or 3 times. Attach the layers together to get a piece that's around 2 mm thick, and glue it to the back of the fridge. Then cut this part several times and stack the elements in groups of 4 layers each. In the end, you should make about 8 pieces. Glue them to the top side of the fridge, 1 aligned with the back, 1 with the front, and the others in between, trying to keep them evenly spaced. Cut this rectangle into lightweight cardstock, then press it against a wet sponge to dampen it. This will make the cardstock easier to shape. Glue this part to the top of the fridge this way. Next, cut this part into metallic cardstock. I used the lid of a takeaway type food container. Then cut this rectangle into black paper, and truth be told, I simply colored a piece of copy paper with a black marker and glue it to the back of the metallic part, like this. Attach this piece to the back of the fridge. Then cut this into photo paper and glue it on top of the metallic layer. Now cut these strips and glue them to the outer sides of the refrigerator's back, folding them like this. Then cut this part and attach it to the top of the fridge. Finally, cut this part twice and use it to cover the fridge's sides. Now cut this into photo paper and glue the 2 pieces over the top and center of the fridge's front. Then cut this part into metallic cardstock and this one into black paper. Glue them together. Then attach the final piece to the bottom of the fridge. Lastly, cut these strips into glossy paper and glue them here and here. Now we're gonna need 2 tiny magnets. They should be around 3 mm in diameter and 1 mm in thickness. I'll link the ones I used in the description box just in case, but if you can't find them, you can use some glue putty in their place. Glue them into these slots on the fridge's left side. This is what our miniature fridge should look like right now. It's time to start working on the doors of our refrigerator. Cut this part of the template twice and attach the 2 layers together. Then cut this part 2 or 3 times and glue all the elements on top of the previous ones. The resulting piece should be around 3 mm thick. Now cut this part 4 or 5 times and attach it to the rest of the door. Should end up with a piece that's around 5 mm thick. Repeat the same process for these parts to make the freezer's door. Now we're gonna need 2 little plastic straws like these. I believe they're originally intended for making cake pops, and once again I'll link them in the description if you want to get them. Otherwise you can make them yourself with paper this way. Cut one of the straws at 14 cm and the other at 9.5 cm. Then cut both straws at approximately 1 cm from each end, like this. Take a piece of metal wire and cut out 2 pieces as long as the 2 straws. Slide the wire into the 3 parts of each straw this way. Attach the straws to the doors by putting glue on the 2 short ends. The middle section should remain loose. And I suggest painting this part of the doors white before you glue the straw in place. Now take 2 more little magnets and glue them into these slots. Next, cut these strips into photo paper and glue them around the edge of both doors, like this. Then cover the exterior of each door with these parts cut into glossy paper. Lastly, cut these letters and glue them to the fridge's door. I obviously use the first letters for my own name because I'm a known egomaniac, but I'll link the font that I use in the description in case you want to spell a different word. I also included a printable version of the logo if you're using my free template and you don't want to cut all these tiny letters by hand. At this point, we can begin working on the inner sides of the doors. Cut this part and attach it to the freezer's door. Then cut this into cardstock a few times and stack the layers together until you get to a final piece that's around 3 mm thick. Cover its edges with this strip cut into photo paper. Now cut this part, attach the 2 sides together, then glue them to the cardstock base. Attach the final piece to the freezer's door this way. Next, cut this part into glossy paper and glue it to the bottom of the door. Repeat the same step for this part. Now cut this part and attach it to the fridge's door. Once again, I suggest painting the base white if you use the colored cardstock like this one. Then cut these parts and use them to add a few more details. Next, cut this into cardstock and attach all the pieces together. Top of both sides with a layer cut into photo paper. Repeat the same process for this part. Then cut this 3 or 4 times and glue layers together. The final piece should be around 2 mm thick. Repeat these steps to make 2 more pieces. Cover them with a glossy layer on both sides, and I suggest coloring the edges with white paint beforehand. At this point, you should have these elements ready. Cut this part into lightweight cardstock, then glue one of the little boards to its left side. Glue the 3 shorter boards horizontally. The middle board should be aligned with the bottom of this little slot. Leave the last board aside for a moment and cut these parts into clear plastic. Fold them along the dashed lines. Then attach them to the rest of the structure. Now cut this part into photo paper and glue the elements behind the shelves this way. Now we can attach the last board in place. Attach the resulting element to the door this way. Attach the doors to the fridge by gluing the central part of each straw to the fridge's right side. To make the handles for a miniature fridge, cut this part and glue 2 sides together. Then cut this a handful of times and attach the layers together. The resulting piece should be 4 mm thick. Repeat the same step for this part, which should measure around 3 mm in thickness. You should end up with these 3 elements. Connect them this way. Then cut this part and attach it to the rest of the handle. Lastly, cut this and glue it on top of the handle. We'll have to make 2 identical handles. Color them with silver chrome paint, and I coated them with a layer of resin first to make them appear smoother. Glue the handles to the fridge's doors, like this. And our miniature fridge is ready! As promised, here's a link to the free printable template, and if you want to make more miniature kitchen appliances, you may want to watch this playlist next. And this is all for today's video. Until next time, bye!